You're listening to Drug Nonsense, the podcast exposing the falsehoods and sheer idiocy of the mainstream media's reporting about drugs. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the new edition of Drug Nonsense. I'm Emmanuel Spherios.
I'm Mason Burks.
And the first thing we want to say is that we decided we're going to make Drug Nonsense free now. It's no longer going to be behind our Patreon paywall.
Yep. I mean, we just decided that this is too important and too fun to keep from anyone. So we do still encourage everyone to please contribute to the Patreon. Please help us keep this going. It does take up a lot of time and a considerable amount of energy.
Yeah, most of the people who have contributed on our Patreon have said that they're not really doing it to get the free episodes of Drug Nonsense. They're doing it because they love Drug Positive and they just want to support us. And many people have also told me that they like Drug Nonsense better.
It's because of me, isn't it?
It's you. It's because you're young and cute. No, it's important stuff. Like, we need to get this out to the public. We need more people to hear this.
So please head on over to patreon.com. You can search for Drug Positive. Starting donations are about $3 a month. You can donate more if you'd like. If you feel like giving us $100,000, that would be lovely.
We could quit our jobs then and just do this full time.
We could. It'd be great. So shall we get into it?
All right, let's do it. So what is the hottest topic going on right now, Mason?
Well, as I am terrified of, and as I'd imagine everyone else spends every waking moment thinking of, we're all going to die because of coronavirus. At least that's what the media wants us to believe. But police departments around the country have been posting things on social media warning people that methamphetamine and other substances are contaminated with the coronavirus and that they should bring these substances in and they can test them to tell you if your drugs have coronavirus.
Yeah, and of course they're doing this in order to lure unsuspecting drug users in so that they can arrest them. You've probably seen this on social media already. It's going around. The first one, I think, was St. Francis County in Arkansas. The sheriff's department posted this. But the same hoaxes also happened in Decatur County, Kansas, Merrill, Wisconsin, Johnson City, Texas, and Tavares, Florida. These police departments are putting out fake announcements to lure people in.
One of these articles that we read for this mentions that some police departments did the same thing when everyone was afraid of Ebola, and at least one person was arrested because of their faith that maybe law enforcement cares about them. Just to read one of these announcements, because it is saddeningly funny. Warning, if you've recently purchased meth locally, it may be contaminated with the coronavirus. Please take it to your sheriff's office or police department, and they will test it for free. If you're not comfortable going into an office, please contact any officer, and they'll test your meth in the privacy of your own home. Please spread the word. And that's from the St. Francis County Sheriff's Office in Arkansas.
This probably only works with meth because when you've been up for days, you can get pretty paranoid, suffering what we call methamphetamine psychosis, and maybe you will be so worried that you'll want the police to make sure you haven't contracted coronavirus.
I mean, the same kind of thing has happened before where police departments have posted things on Facebook saying there's been an outbreak recently in our community of drug dealers shorting their customers. You know, always make sure that you're getting what you paid for. And if you want to, you can buy your substance. You can bring it to us. We'll weigh it for you and we'll let you know if you got ripped off. And it's because we care about you and we're definitely not trying to ruin your life.
Maybe these are just cops with a sense of humor. Like maybe they don't really expect that this is going to work, but they're, just kind of perpetuating this stereotype of dumb drug users because obviously you have to be an idiot if you use drugs.
Yeah. I do think that we need more humor in the world, but as part of an institution that's inherently kind of oppressive, the only kind of topical things that police can joke about are things that it's not okay to joke about, right? Like the activities of law enforcement really profoundly can negatively impact people's lives. And so making light of that it's really harmful to communities. It's harmful to our relationship with the police, like the fact that they're publicly presenting themselves as just mocking people that either are doing nothing wrong or, if anything, just need some help is really problematic.
Not to mention, it's just not funny. Making a joke about the coronavirus that's already killed thousands and is likely to kill even more people and is spreading across the U.S. now. It's just, you don't make jokes about that.
Yeah. It's not funny.
It's not funny.
It's not funny. But we're funny.
We're trying to be funny.
No, I think I'm pretty hilarious, but we can let everyone else decide that. If you think I'm not funny, just let me know and I'll stop.
Okay. All right. This is going to get better. All right. We should...
It will get better.
Okay.
All right. So recently there's been an initiative proposal in Oregon to decriminalize personal possession of all substances, as well as sort of direct a lot of tax revenue from marijuana sales towards treatment facilities, treatment programs, and access to those services to folks.
Yeah, this to me, this is a good sign, but I also think it falls short. One of the problems is that while they talk about decriminalizing all drugs, it's not full decriminalization. It still remains a civil infraction that's punishable by a maximum of a $100 fine. No jail time, but still there's a punishment.
And additionally, there is a condition that fine can be avoided if you complete a health assessment through an addiction recovery center. But 90% of people who are using drugs are not struggling with addiction.
Right.
And they do not need intervention, especially from an authority that is as invasive and not understanding and honestly naive as an addiction recovery center, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't specialize in understanding substance use full stop. They specialize in understanding addiction and looking for addiction where there is none. And this sort of funnels people into the very problematic for-profit industry of addiction recovery and treatment.
Yeah, forcing people to go to an addiction recovery center is not going to be helpful. It's probably going to raise a lot of money for these treatment centers, though. And I think that's really part of what's going on here. A lot of treatment centers are behind this.
And with that said, there are a lot of treatment centers that do really, really help people. I know a number of people who've been through treatment programs that say that it was one of the best things that ever sort of happened to them. But just because judges are specifically sending people to centers like this doesn't mean that they're going to help. Funneling everyone that they can into that sort of system is not how we should be addressing these problems.
Right. Another interesting thing in this article is that it also talks about another proposition on the ballot in Oregon, this time to legalize psilocybin mushrooms, but only for medical use, meaning if you go to a licensed therapist and pay a lot of money, you can sit on a couch in a room and take mushrooms legally. And what's interesting to me about this is it kind of shows the wrong approach to ending the drug war. What we need is to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms so that people can feel free to use them on their own. But once a profit industry gets involved, they are going to want to make sure that psilocybin mushrooms are not legalized or decriminalized because they're going to want to force people to have to go and pay money for their treatment program. This is what the alcohol industry has been doing for cannabis for decades, funding money to prevent cannabis legalization. So we have to think really carefully. We want to see psychedelics legalized. We want people to have access to them, but we don't want to set up a system that prevents the full decriminalization of these substances.
Yeah, the democratization of consciousness needs to take precedence over extracting resources from people who really need help, right? If someone stands to benefit from or heal from mind-altering substances, that is more important than whatever sort of big, shiny, over-marketed programs people put together for the sake of getting money from people that need help.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. So speaking of mushrooms, there's a company that recently got the trademark for the word psilocybin. Emmanuel, where is this happening?
I think she's in California somewhere. It's this woman named Scarlett Ravin. And she's starting a company that sells psilocybin chocolates that don't contain any psilocybin. And
they're just called psilocybin. And she says that the point is to begin educating, enlightening, and supporting the community in upgrading their inner vibrations in order to get everything they want of their time here on Earth. And that is from the mission statement of this organization.
Yeah, she's caused a big outrage in the psychedelic community by doing this. I mean, I don't even know how she ended up winning this trademark, right? It's a word for a chemical that's been around for thousands of years. She says she's not going to sue anyone who's using it, but why trademark it then? You know, clearly she's trying to make money on her chocolate business.
Ravin says that her goal in trademarking psilocybin was to prevent the substance from being the next cannabis, which she said has been corrupted from its quote-unquote true spiritual medicinal benefit and turned into a corporate commodity.
Yeah, so the quotes I've read from her seem like she's trying to make sure in her mind that psilocybin retains these qualities of a medicine, a spiritually uplifting substance, and doesn't become what she refers to as a recreational shit show, which she thinks has happened to cannabis, right? So she's kind of woo-woo and wants to raise the status of psilocybin by removing all recreational associations from it and saying, no, it's just a spiritual medicine. And of course, those who've listened to us talk probably know that we do not judge recreational use, and a great many people use mushrooms and just have a wonderful time. I've had plenty of mushroom trips at festivals just laughing my ass off, and there was very little spiritual upliftment that happened, and that's a totally fine way to do it. So she might be well-intentioned, but she's also perpetuating the same anti-recreational drug use judgments.
Yeah. And this is the kind of thing that, honestly, I think is going to happen more and more as psychedelics have continued to become more and more part of the mainstream discourse around mental health, around treatment of the ailments of being a human being on this planet in this day and age.
You know, framing psychedelics as only therapeutic medicinal runs the risk of further entrenching drug war policies, right? Because there are many drugs that have medical uses that are banned, Schedule II drugs, and there's a raging drug war against them, right? Methamphetamine is actually Schedule II because sometimes it is prescribed for ADHD. Cocaine is Schedule II, right? So we're going to see MDMA and maybe psilocybin legalized for medical use, and then wealthy people can pay a lot of money to go to a therapist and do a session. But it's not going to change the drug war. It's not going to end the persecution of people who use these substances outside of these legal avenues, which is the vast majority.
Ravin said that once the psilocybin trademark chocolates are ready for market, she plans to contribute 10% of the proceeds from that to MAPS. As far as we're aware, she didn't really ask them about that. I don't think they want her money.
The people at MAPS are really upset by this trademark. I don't think anyone really appreciates it. Some people in the community were talking about suing her. I'm not sure that's going to happen. Many people, including myself, emailed her. You should too. Scarlett Ravin. Go to Facebook. Ravin. Her name is Scarlett Ravin. Let her know what you think of her trademarking the word psilocybin. Capitalism corrupts everything, and that's exactly what's going on here.
All right. So, Emmanuel, I've got a question for you. What happens when you take a exorbitantly large amount of LSD?
Well, the first thing is cures your Lyme disease.
Is that so? Wasn't familiar with that.
That's been in the news lately, right? Even CNN had it a couple days straight on their homepage. 3 case studies where individuals took very large doses of acid and had surprisingly positive results from it. One of which was a woman who took how many milligrams?
55 milligrams.
55 milligrams.
Yeah, that's 55,000 normal doses.
Yeah, that is an extremely large dose. And it says here she vomited for 12 hours, but then it ended up curing her Lyme's disease, or at least getting rid of the pain in her foot that was a result of her Lyme's disease.
And something just to touch on is that she did insufflate this. She snorted 55 milligrams of crystal LSD, and just spending a lot of time doing testing for people, being at music festivals in that kind of environment, it really pains me that I still have to say, like, don't snort random powders. If anyone hasn't told you, it's not the best idea.
Yeah, the good thing is that I don't think there is that much crystal LSD that just shows up on a plate at a festival. Like most of the people making LSD are dosing it out onto blotter or in liquid vials before they bring it out into the general public. I guess there's still a chance that you can go over to some chemist manufacturer's home and there'll be a plate of crystal LSD. But like people I know who have crystal LSD, like that shit gets locked away. That's so dangerous. Yeah. You blow it up into your face and suddenly you could be tripping for days, So I think this incident happened a long time ago. It doesn't say when it took place. It was a review of some case studies. Still, please don't do this. Even 10 times the dose is a big dose. That's another example they give in this article, one of the 3 case studies. She took only 10 times the normal dose of LSD. They don't even say what a normal dose is, by the way. I'm assuming that they're talking maybe 100 micrograms. That's these days, 100 to 150 is probably normal. What happened to the woman who took 10 times the dose? What was the surprising positive?
She was 15 years old, just for a bit of context, but evidently she began acting very, very unpredictably and then later had what appeared to be a seizure. Something to keep in mind with this is that's not a standard sort of response to 10 times the normal dose of LSD.
Yeah, why would she have a seizure?
Well, this article mentions that at 15 she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and then later says that after this experience, for the most part, she was alleviated from those symptoms, but...
Oh, that was the positive effect.
Yeah. But a very common medication for bipolar disorder is lithium, which in combination with a wide variety of different both recreational and pharmaceutical substances can cause seizures in people. So just want to give that context. Having a seizure on 10 times the normal dose of acid is not a normal response, and there probably was a lot more going on pharmacologically in this context.
Right. And probably LSD is not going to cure most people's bipolar disorder. I'm sorry to say that. A lot of people are also misdiagnosed, with bipolar. A lot of people are. So who knows what was going on with this young woman and how and why it helped her. I think, again, it was a therapeutic effect. This is not unreasonable.
Still not advised. But if you decide you're going to take 550 times the normal dose of LSD, write something down. Not a whole lot of case studies on that.
Should we tell people the story of our LSD overdose?
Why not? Would you like to introduce the context of this? This was right after Emmanuel moved to New Mexico. This is actually the second time we ever hung out.
Yeah, I made a mistake. It's really embarrassing, actually. Dance Safe founder accidentally overdosing not just himself, but someone else. There's some lessons here, though. Okay, this has never happened to me before. I've never done this before. So embarrassed, but essentially, I got a vial of L from someone who I've gotten vials from before, and they're always the same strength, and I typically dilute them to roughly 10 micrograms per drop, so that I can then carefully dose myself or others with a microdose or a museum dose, say 30 to 40 micrograms. And so I carefully prepared the normal way I do, essentially, assuming that there's 100 micrograms per drop in the vial, you put 100 drops of water and 10 drops of the L, and you got essentially 10 micrograms per drop, right? Did I do that math right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, see, if I can do the math right, it should work out, right? And I thought, okay, new vial, maybe it's a little bit stronger, but like at the most, it might be double the strength, something like that, So I was like, hey, Mason, I've never been to Albuquerque. Well, I can come down there. You can take me around. Maybe we can go out. Oh, we
were going to go to the DEA has a traveling museum exhibit entitled Drugs, the Costs and Consequences.
That's right.
If you ever get a chance to see it, it's actually kind of saddening. Most of the ridiculous claims that they make, they cite themselves at the end of the informational placard, and they do actually try and blame 9/11 on heroin. It's a very very tenuous link to make, but
we did go, but we didn't go that day. We didn't go that day because...
we didn't really go anywhere that day.
What I'm about to describe, right. But that was the plan. I was like, hey, let's take a museum dose of LSD and you can show me around Albuquerque. Because, like a 30 microgram dose is like you can still drive on it. It's like there's no hallucinations. There's nothing is moving, right? Well... that's not what happened. Something went very, very wrong. And I would guess we ended up taking somewhere between 600 and 1,000 micrograms. So 6 to 10 times a full dose.
And it was 20 or 30 times what we were shooting for.
Exactly. We were on the couch for 4 hours, and it kept getting higher and higher, and I was so embarrassed, and I just kept apologizing to you. You took it very well, though.
It was at least 3 times more than I'd ever taken on purpose. And I will say I've never seen a human being with so many eyes before. So
we eventually went for a walk, and I saw for the first time, it was really close to us, a roadrunner. You've seen them your whole life here, but those
Yes.
of us who aren't from the desert, like we just know roadrunners from Warner Brothers cartoons, right?
it was really hard not to start laughing at you. I was trying not to because I knew it might not be received well, but to me it felt like someone having a religious experience seeing a pigeon.
I loved it.
I'm really glad that it was as meaningful for you as it was.
It was much more meaningful being on the high dose of LSD at the time. Yeah, I guess I love they're my favorite bird now.
Oh, I'm happy to hear it. I hope you never forget.
I will never forget. Sorry, what is the lesson here? Well, the lesson, how could such a mistake happen? I definitely diluted it correctly, right? Two things I think could have happened. The first is when I called my dealer, first thing he said is, "Did you shake the bottle?" Right, so you get a little vial. Usually there'll be a dropper that descends down into the bottle, right? And even though you can't see it, any drug that's diluted in water or alcohol, even a LSD that's kind of invisible, it ends up settling. So likely, I didn't shake the bottle, empty out the dropper, and then take and put one drop. I took a drop or 10 drops from the very bottom where the LSD has settled. Another possibility is that none of these glass bottles actually are vacuum sealed. And I had this vial for about 3 months, and maybe some of the alcohol, because I know this dealer, he mixes it, and alcohol evaporates even more quickly than water does. So maybe some of that evaporated, and it was double the strength. But even double the strength, I think, it was 20, 30 times what I thought it was. So probably I didn't shake the bottle. So if you get a liquid L, everyone, always shake the bottle before you take a drop out. That's the lesson.
And on that day, we became best friends.
And I said, Mason, you should join me on drug nonsense. Okay, that ends our segment on LSD overdoses.
Now on to MDMA overdoses.
Oh,
There's a story
right.
that's recently been in the news of a woman who died after, we say allegedly because there are a lot of things that are kind of fishy about how this is presented, who allegedly, she did die. She definitely died. But allegedly after drinking a single sip of wine that was, they say laced with MDMA, but in the discussion it becomes clear that it was not like
saturated
laced
with MDMA. If there's anything true about this article, right, like, she took a sip of wine. It tasted bad. She dumped the wine out. And then shortly thereafter, she falls unconscious. She dies 5 days later. They do a blood test during this period and find high amounts of MDMA in her bloodstream. And I'm thinking, how saturated would this bottle of wine have to be for a single sip to cause an overdose? I mean, people can take a big sip of wine. Like, maybe it was a gulp of wine, right?
Maybe.
And, maybe a couple grams would do that. But I would think that the markers of dying from an overdose of MDMA would be the same as they are all the time, which is seizure, elevated body temperature. They don't mention any of that. They just say she fell unconscious. So there is some strangeness about this. The police never went back and tested the bottle of wine, at least not according to any of the articles. This is one of those clickbait articles, by the way. There's dozens. You can just Google wine MDMA sip death, and you will find dozens of articles, and you read them, and they all say exactly the same thing. Who knows who the first media outlet was that ran the story, but everyone else just kind of copies it and moves the words around a little bit so that they don't plagiarize, but it's a clickbait story. What can we say? If there's something true about it, it's a tragedy. But it's just there's some things that don't feel right about it.
Yeah.
And there's no lesson in it. There's no lesson in it, right? No one's like, how can we figure out why in the world this happened if it really did,
Yeah. Apparently the police in this community, this happened told people to alert police to any suspicious wine bottles and remain vigilant. It's kind of offloading the responsibility. The people that are responsible for drug prohibition are ultimately responsible for things that happen because of drug prohibition.
Well, it could just be one of those scare stories that authorities love to put out there because it gets a lot of play. Like, be careful, there's drugs in your children's Halloween candy. Now it's like, be careful, the bottle of wine that you're about to open could actually be laced with drugs that could kill you.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll leave it at that, I guess. Not much to say there. Drink wine without fear, everyone. That's what I want to say.
All right, let's see. So the next story we have is about some people that for some reason seem to be convinced that they can take all of the fun parts out of MDMA and still use it to heal people. Anyone who's ever really taken MDMA, I think, kind of intuitively understands that the lived experience that you have of working through your emotions and your perceptions is the thing that is healing you, right? MDMA therapy is not like chemotherapy.
It's not like chemotherapy. It's not like the way that other medicines work by causing a pharmacological effect that cures a disease. The therapeutic effects of psychoactive, not just MDMA, but also psilocybin. There's another article here too, the same thing. Like, there are scientists who are trying to come up with a psychedelic that's non-hallucinogenic, like a psilocybin alternative that doesn't produce a trippy experience, right? And I think what's really going on here is that because trippy experiences are considered bad, or the euphoria from MDMA is considered bad, these researchers are sort of catering to drug war attitudes while hoping to capitalize on the medicinal benefits by finding a substance that can have the same therapeutic benefits without producing the psychoactive effects. And I think they're fundamentally missing the point here. Those psychoactive effects are what is therapeutic. You aren't going to get a therapeutic effect without thinking new thoughts, feeling new emotions, talking about your trauma, or having new experiences with people. It's about reshaping our neurochemical pathways to a more positive level.
And our neurochemical pathways are reshaped by our conscious experience of the things that are tied to those pathways, right?
That's right.
Trauma reshapes the pathways in your brain, but it's not reshaping the pathways in your brain and then also happening to be a scary experience, right? Traumatic experiences and the fact that you're experiencing them is the thing that is changing the neural structure of your brain.
You can't traumatize someone unless they actually experience the trauma.
Yeah.
And it works the same way around. You don't have a healing effect unless you actually feel the experiences of the relief or the understanding, the new way of looking at things, etc. It's this false duality that there must be some chemical action going on that causes the healing and the experience is just secondary. To me, it's just so obviously not the case. If you were to knock someone out on anesthesia, for example, and then give them psilocybin, and then 8 hours later wake them up, they would not have the therapeutic benefits because the serotonin stimulation, the 2A receptor stimulation that is the primary mechanism of action of psilocybin and most psychedelics too, if you're unconscious, it's not going to cause any new thoughts and new feelings and new emotions. You're not going to be processing and experiencing things. Nothing is going to happen if you do that. So there is just no chance of anyone developing a drug that can produce a therapeutic benefit like psilocybin, but doesn't produce a psilocybin-like effect.
Absolutely. And I mean, it comes back to this sort of question of why are these drugs being developed in the first place, right? And it's because they can be patented, they can be profited on. It's the same reason why Adderall, trademark symbol, is 75% dextroamphetamine, 25% levoamphetamine. It's not because that induces the best results possible. It's because it's their special concoction and they can trademark it and they can make all the money off of it, right? It's the same reason why just the levorotary isomer of ketamine is being developed to treat depression, even though there's actually no indications whatsoever that it does better than any other combination of the isomers. It's because people can make money off of it, right?
Right.
And the attempts to, I want to say, just disrespect psilocybin, the company that's doing that says that this kind of drug would be more scalable, marketable, and profitable than one that causes trips.
There you
It
go.
could also be more accessible than current frameworks for psilocybin treatment for depression, because those treatments take hours at a time. God forbid we spend a couple hours trying to help someone. and provide the most large-scale benefit to those who desperately need options for treating mental illness. I don't think it would create that much large-scale benefit because I don't think it would create any benefit.
There you go. They say right there, it's about the money. They want to make money. They want to create a drug that doesn't exist in nature, that's not naturally occurring, that they can patent, and they are never going to find it. They're never going to find it. It's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how these ancient medicines work.
In trying to defend their sort of thought process behind suggesting that there's a physiological thing that they can divorce from the transcendent experience, they say that clinicians have started to see that for some patients, the effects of traditional psilocybin therapy can wear off after a few months, even in people who initially showed massive improvement. And their response to that is that it's not just a change in your perspective of the world that benefits you. If an incredibly powerful experience fundamentally shifted your worldview, why would that benefit start to fade? They then say that there must be some kind of physiological something along with it. Now, there is a physiological something along with it, and it's happening because of the lived experience. The fact that sometimes benefits start to fade is because it's not a panacea, right? Psilocybin isn't going to make all of your problems go away. You have to do... You have to integrate it.
You have to do psilocybin sort of regularly, too.
And talk about what you've experienced and grow through it and work through it. It's not an antibiotic. Stop trying to make it an antibiotic. Stop trying to make money off of it.
To really understand how psychoactive drugs can be therapeutic, you have to understand how the brain's neuron system works and realize that there is no separation between inner and outer. When you have an experience, there is a neurochemical pathway, an electrochemical signal, a network of signaling that is happening at that time. And every experience that we have reinforces that patterning and signaling network that makes it more likely to be experienced again. In fact, this is what memory is. The more intense the experience, the sort of deeper those grooves are carved in the electrochemical pathway. So the reason psychoactive drugs are therapeutic and can have long-lasting positive impacts is because as you're experiencing the positive healing through the subjective experience, you are also carving out those electrochemical pathways deeper. Literally, you're strengthening the connections between dendrites and axons. Likewise, intense trauma can cause flashbacks, can cause you to feel anxiety in similar situations because you've carved out these sort of negative pathways and signaling that involve your amygdala and fear and whatnot. So it is certainly true that there's a physical component to the healing, but that physical component is absolutely 100% tied to the subjective experience happening at the same time.
And that also reminds me of... it's been said that the reason why it seems like time passes quicker and quicker as you get older is because generally we stop having new experiences as we settle into a routine and we become slaves to the system that tries to dictate our lives and tries to extract our labor and our value, right?
That's why you have to do psychedelics often, and then time will move more slowly.
Oh, yeah. And, if you experience something that was really traumatic in your life and every day you've woken up and you felt that in your body and in your mind and your heart, and then one day you're at a music festival and some very kind person gives you a pill and you feel loved and safe and cared for by the world and hopeful about your own life for the first time in 10 years, that will probably be the most profound thing that you can experience. That reminder of the fact that you're capable of experiencing safe. You're capable of experiencing feelings of love and empathy for yourself and peace. So, also one thing that makes me really irritated is that one of the companies that is doing work like this is called Entheogenics with an X Biosciences, which is just so offensive because, an entheogen literally means bringing out the divine within, right? And this company is trying to extract the divine, transcendent, healing, spiritual or religious part of these experiences.
And sell it to you.
The irony literally makes me sick.
All right, well, wait, let's talk about ketamine, though, because maybe ketamine is an exception to this rule. There are people who think that ketamine's therapeutic benefit is only pharmacological, whereby you could knock you out on an anesthetic, give you the ketamine, wake you up, and you will have experienced the benefit. But there are others who think that the subjective, spiritual, trippy experience of ketamine is essential to it. And I'm on the fence about this with ketamine, and only ketamine. What do you think?
I mean, I'm inclined to believe that even if there is a physiological component to, or even if physiological changes is the root cause of lasting therapeutic effects from ketamine, I think that the experience for many, many people can still be a part of that, right? Even if it is mostly physical. I do think that that's, especially with ketamine, something that is worth more looking into, because I've met a lot of people that said that they just really don't like what ketamine makes them feel. And looking into a lot of online communities of people who are receiving ketamine infusions for, mental health treatment, most of whom are not recreational drug users, I've seen what to me was a really surprising number of people saying, like, I really, 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 really do not like how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking during an infusion, and it does help with my depression, but I don't want to. I mean, I think that learning to be at peace with letting go and having an experience like that is a useful thing. But at the same time, if someone's really profoundly depressed and they're not in a place in their life where they can make the moves to come to terms with chemically induced oblivion, then they might benefit from not having to go through that.
Knock him out first with general anesthesia, give him the ketamine. Yeah, I think the difference here is that ketamine acts on NMDA receptors and is theorized to heal depression by regrowing neurons that have been destroyed by inflammation, which can happen during prolonged severe depression. They've done this in rats, and they think that the physiological effect of the regrowth of these neurons through the stimulation of NMDA receptors has nothing to do with the experience while you're on it. Right? So ketamine may actually be very different than the classic psychedelics that work by stimulating a subset of serotonin receptors, causing a cascade of new neural connections, making you think differently and have new experiences that can reshape yourself and your understanding. That's the difference here to me.
But time will tell.
We'll see. Do more drugs. Find out for yourself. So the next story you want to talk about is actually something that's pretty common. Essentially, it's cops displaying a bunch of drugs that they've confiscated and patting themselves on the back about how many lives they saved were these drugs to get out on the street. And the headline of this article is U.S. fentanyl busts saved 229 million American lives. The implication being that because this fentanyl was off the street, 3/4 of the population of the United States are still alive.
Tweaking the numbers to the point where you can say, oh, we saved over 200 million people so that people think that you're actually helping anyone is manipulative, right? And they know that this is not how the math actually works out, right? They know it's just something that's an abstraction to the point that it means nothing.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about criticizing police busts of kilos of fentanyl because fentanyl, is the most dangerous opioid out there. It is not the opioid preferred by anyone, but the iron law of prohibition has assured us that fentanyl is going to now be the opioid that is most widespread. The iron law of prohibition, in case you don't remember, is when a drug is prohibited, that only assures that the most concentrated version of that drug is going to be the one that's on the streets. Like during alcohol prohibition, you couldn't find beer or wine. It was all hard liquor because you can smuggle it, transport it in smaller containers. And that's why fentanyl is now replacing heroin. So once again, we have the drug warriors. And you got to look at this picture. Like there's a Border Patrol agent here with an assault rifle standing in the photograph with all these bags of fentanyl, right? So
they also just have a giant placard that says the word fentanyl on it, which
right.
is
that's enough to scare people, right? It's like coronavirus, fentanyl.
All caps. All caps right there.
Here we have law enforcement trying to claim that they are protecting people when in fact it is the prohibition of opioids that has caused fentanyl to flood the market. And in fact, they are not taking but a tiny fraction of the fentanyl off the market when they make these claims.
So the next thing we've got to talk about is there is a sort of program going on at Duke University, led by Professor of Pathology Herman Statz, to develop a vaccine for cocaine.
Oh, give me that right away. I absolutely do not want to prevent myself from experiencing the pleasures of cocaine. Nope, I enjoy using cocaine every now and then. Thank you very much.
Me too.
Should we do a drug nonsense while we're on cocaine like we did one when we were on Adderall?
I don't know how well that'd go over. But it's not the most functional of feelings, so.
Like we really have to rehabilitate cocaine in the popular.
It's hard because cocaine is stigmatized, and a lot of that's because of like the bloodshed and the economic context of it. But it's going to be impossible to kind of implement broad systemic change in production and dealing with it until people on a day-to-day basis stop stigmatizing it.
Yeah, really there is a lot of violence, but until we legally regulate, we're not going to end the violence around the cocaine trade.
But it's going to be really difficult to propose and pass legislation that will create a meaningful change in the supply chain until we as individuals can get to a point where we're not stigmatizing cocaine as this manifestation of the devil.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is a lot of assholes become much more obnoxious when they use cocaine.
Yeah.
And so, like, stimulants in general can bring out the worst in people, but those people who aren't assholes can do cocaine and have a wonderful, fun time. Cocaine can be bonding. I've had a great time doing cocaine and have never become violent, and that's the vast majority of people as well.
Yeah. Like I was telling this to a friend the other day who had never really started using substances until pretty recently. I brought up cocaine in conversation, and she just said, like, oh, like, what does that actually feel like? Like, the only times I've been exposed to it is when people ask me if I want to do some, off of the paper towel dispenser in a bar at 1 a.m, or like the people that I know that do it, like, they just do it and then they keep doing it and they keep doing it and they keep doing it and they get narcissistic or loud and I just, it took me a little while to figure out how best to say that, you're a kind, compassionate, reasonable, cautious person. So if you did cocaine, you'd feel energized, you'd feel alert, you'd feel invincible in some ways that aren't inherently bad,
Right.
Like just in the same way that MDMA can make people feel feelings of safety or comfort or compassion that they haven't felt in a long time and remind them, like, you're capable of feeling this, right? Feeling invincible and energized and like you can do anything in the world can be really healing for people. Like for a lot of my youth, I was very depressed. I was very dejected. I didn't have a whole lot of hope. I didn't have hardly any self-confidence. And stimulants for me were something that kind of showed me, like, no, you can feel extroverted and energetic and like proud of yourself.
Yeah. And, proof that this is really just a narrative that we've been fed is that when you look at cocaine culture in the 70s, there was none of that stigma. Cocaine was a glamorous drug through the 70s. It was popular in discos. People went out dancing on it. But speaking of people who do get into trouble with cocaine, that's what this article is actually about. A cocaine vaccine. Essentially, they have created a vaccine that, at least in animal studies, has significantly reduced the behavioral effects of giving cocaine to these animals. And they want to develop this to give to people. So I guess sort of like Vivitrol that prevents your body from reacting to opioids. This vaccine is going to prevent cocaine from working. And they think that this is going to be a successful treatment for people who are addicted to cocaine. And I have grave doubts about that, and also see problems with just this approach in general. You know that this type of vaccine is going to end up being forcibly required on people who get busted with cocaine, right? These things aren't always voluntary when they come out, or you'll be coerced, just like people are today with naltrexone or Vivitrol, who get busted and say, well, you can go to jail for 10 years or you can take this vaccine.
All right, so our last article of the episode is that there's a study that has found the absolutely shocking, unpredictable, unforeseen outcome that most opiate deaths are not on purpose. That's something I didn't know. I was under the impression that every single person dying of opioids was just they finally succumbed to the nihilistic draw of death.
Yeah, it's one of those you need a study to prove what's just obvious to people, right? I guess what was interesting, I don't know how they did their study, but they did determine that 4% of opioid deaths are actually suicides. But I guess, there are people who think that opioid users are all self-destructive and maybe trying to kill themselves, and it takes a study to convince people otherwise. I mean, you got to think who the researchers were who did this study. Maybe they were just, on our side here, trying to say, like, come on, everyone. 96% of opioid deaths are accidental. The drug users don't want to die. It really is something I think that needs to be reinforced. It really does. It might be obvious to most of us working in harm reduction, but the stigma and the demonization of people who use drugs might lead other people to think that they don't care about their lives. But that's not true, folks.
Yeah. And I mean, demonization isn't just a quick and descriptive word. Like, it really is like drugs are portrayed to people as this thing that's like fundamentally a force of evil in a way that hardly any other things in the world people will accept that kind of black and white proposition, right? Like the fact that anyone needs to be convinced that most of the time when someone overdoses on an opiate, it's not because they're trying to die, is because I feel like a lot of people have this perspective on drugs where the only difference between drugs and death is that one of them is a crystal you can hold in your hand.
All right, that's it for the show, everyone.
Well, thank you for joining us again. It's great to be back after our unexpected hiatus, and you can look forward to a lot more amazing content that is all going to be totally free.
That's right.
Moving forward.
So thank you. Don't forget to go to patreon.com and subscribe to us. Not that you're going to get any premium content anymore. No, you would only do that just because you love us and want to support us because you believe in the work that we do.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. I'm Mason Burks.
And I'm Emmanuel Spherios.
See you later.
Bye.